A series on Kiddush. So tonight we'll focus on the Seder HaKiddush. The Gemara tells us in Brachas, there's a machlokes Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai in terms of the order of Kiddush. Of course, Vayichul is something else. We'll leave Vayichul out of the picture. But the machlokes Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai in terms of what is the order of Kiddush. So Beis Shammai says, first you make the bracha on Kiddushas Hayom first, the Makadesh HaShabbos, and then Boer Pri Hagafen. And Beis Hillel, this is my minhag, I'm not sure about yours, I make Boer Pri Hagafen first, and then I make the Makadesh HaShabbos bracha. That's the Gemara in Brachas. Machlokes Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, and the Gemara goes through the reasons being, was the Yom Gorim the Yayin the Yom, and the Gemara goes through the different reasons why. So there's a famous question of the Achronim on the order, because we know, we're familiar with a famous principle in the Gemara, Tadir v'she'eno Tadir Kodem. If you have something which is frequent versus something which isn't so frequent, Tadir Kodem, the one that's more frequent takes precedence. An everyday example would be talis over tefillin. That tefillin we wear most days of the week, usually 6, but talis we wear 7 days of the week. And therefore, there's another reason, Malin Makodesh Moridin they give as well, that we go from talis to tefillin. But the other reason the poskim give is because talis is more frequent, and something which is more frequent takes precedence. It is in contrast to Western society, which is very big on events, on things that happen once in a while. That gets more precedence, more credence, but something which happens all the time is usually viewed less important. So i.e., like, and people always view, and it's not definitely wrong, but people always view, let's say, Yom Kippur. What's the holiest day of the year? Yom Kippur, because it happens once a year. Or is it the discussion Yom Kippur or Shabbos? So it's a discussion actually in the Gemara, in the Gil exactly, which one gets 6 aliyahs, which one gets 7, but we passed in that Yom Kippur gets 6 aliyahs, and Shabbos gets 7. And working with the Ran Shita is that the number of aliyahs signifies the level of Kedushas Hayom. So we see the fact Shabbos gets 7 aliyahs and Yom Kippur 6, we see Shabbos is a higher level of Kedusha than Yom Kippur, and yet Shabbos happens every week. So in Judaism it's the everyday things, it's the weekly things that we get Kedusha from, not just the once in a while. So that's what this principle is. We see, you have a principle, Tadir Sheno Tadir Kodem, that something that happens once in a while versus something which happens frequent, the more frequent takes precedence. That's the kasha of the Pnei Yoshua, the Slach.
Wait, so in the context of this, what's the question?
Yes, I'm asking him about the kasha is why do we make, so the kasha is like this, so we have a principle of Tadir, that's one principle. And now, so the question is like this. Let's say you have one mitzvah, but it has 2 components, i.e. Kiddush. You have a mitzvah of Kiddush. One component is Boer Pri Hagafen, and one component is Kiddushas Hayom, is the Makadesh HaShabbos. So, let's say you have one component, which one takes precedence? Is it the Deraisa? Does Deraisa take precedence over the Derabanan? That's what Pnei Yoshua is assuming in the Slach and other Achronim, that when you have a choice between a Deraisa and a Derabanan, which one comes first, the Deraisa takes precedence. Even if Boer Pri Hagafen might be Tadir, but something which is Deraisa takes precedence over something which is only Derabanan. So that gets into a whole whole issue, what is the right and what is the Rabbanan, which we'll get into in a moment. But that's the Shaila, is the Pnei Yoshua asked the Slach, that if Kedushas Hayom is Daraisa, and Bori Pri Agafen is only Rabbanan, so therefore we should do the Daraisa before the Rabbanan, so therefore we should first make, Beis Shammai seems to have a right. We should do Mekadesh HaShabbos over Bori Pri Agafen, because the Daraisa takes precedence over a Rabbanan. Even if the Rabbanan is more Tadir. So in fact, how much of Kiddush is Daraisa will play a role in the Pnei Yoshua's answer. In other words, we all know the Torah tells us Zocher Yom HaShabbos V'Kadsho. There's a mitzvah in our Torah of making Kiddush, and the Gemara says Zachrei al Hayayin, remember it over wine. So how much of Kiddush is Daraisa? So according to the Rambam, Kiddush b'dvarim, Kiddush with words alone is Daraisa. According to Tosas Rabbi Psachim, that Kiddush al Hayayin is Daraisa, but the actual drinking is only Rabbanan. And the third Shita, it's 2 days until even the drinking is Mavarach Sarach Shiyid. In fact, this is the Machlokas Rashi and Tosas and Nazir. In the beginning of Nazir, when it quotes the pasuk by Nazir, Yayim Sheichar, he shouldn't have wine, except for the Gemara talks about, except for the mitzvah. So the Gemara talks about my nihu kiddush v'havdalah. So the question is, could a nazir drink? Could a nazir drink from the kiddush of havdalah and kiddush? So the Gemara says, and depending how you learn the Gemara, mushba v'yomei mehar sinayu. The way Rashi, or it's not really Rashi, but the Mefarish, he says it's like nishba levat. How can you take a neder not to drink wine? It's mushba v'yomei sinai. Therefore, Rashi holds a nazir does drink wine. In other words, but what do we see? The point being, he says that even the drinking of the wine is daraisa. And Tosas there learns the Gemara differently. It's mushba v'yomei har sinai. It's a bitmiyah. There's no drinking wine is only drabanan. So that's a machlokas over there, Rashi and Tosas. So we have three shitas in the Rishonim. Whether the Rambam, whether Dvarim alone is daraisa, Tosfos that al hayayin is daraisa, and you have Rashi, you have the Mefarish and Nazir that says even the drinking of the wine is daraisa. Those are the three shitas. So we mentioned that Pnei Yoshua asked, why do we make a Bori Pri Agafen before the Mekadesh HaShabbos? Bori Pri Agafen is only D'Rabbanan. The Mavarach al Hayayin. And the Kiddush HaShabbos is Daraisa. So how do we explain our order? So comes along the Pnei Yoshua and says, no. Beis Hillel is right. But what are we talking about? We're talking about what we've discussed before, is based on the Rambam. The Rambam says you go to the mitzvah of Kiddush with words alone. And the Magen Avram extends the Rambam that you fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush min HaTorah when you daven Friday night. You say Baruch Atah Hashem HaKadosh HaShabbos. You fulfill your mitzvah min HaTorah of Kiddush. And that's the famous kasha of the Dagel Maravava. Then, if you already fulfilled your mitzvah min HaTorah of Kiddush, how could you go home and make Kiddush for your wife? But the point being is, the Magen Avram Shita is that you fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush min HaTorah in Shul, or wherever you daven, and when you're making Kiddush al Yayin, the whole Kiddush is only D'Rabbanan. So that's what Pnei Yoshua writes. Ein achinami, that, or we'll get to it in a second, but the reason Beis Hillel is saying that you really, Beis Hillel said you make the Bor Pri Agafen first and then the Mekadesh, because he's talking about you already fulfilled your mitzvah of Kiddush min HaTorah already. We're talking about two D'Rabbanans. If we're talking two D'Rabbanans, so then we go Tadir versus She'eno Tadir Tadir Kodem. So therefore, that's what Pnei Yoshua answers, that really Beis Hillel is right, because we're talking about where you fulfilled already your mitzvah in HaTorah. But if a deraisa does be if you have two components of one mitzvah, it's a question which one goes first. You do the deraisa first, but in this case it's 2 Durabanan, then we fall back on the regular klal of Tadir. And the Slach even takes it further. He takes the next logical extreme. He even says a bigger Kiddush. He says, and he says it by women, but it's true about men as well. He says, and let's say a man daven in shul, daven at home Friday night, and whatever reason the wife is making Kiddush, or let's say the husband's not there. The wife, it could be a man also, but it's more likely the woman didn't daven Ma'ariv, and the husband's out of town. Nashim chayav is bekiddush hayom dvar Torah. Woman's chayav in Kiddush, so she's going to make Kiddush. So the Slach writes, if a woman's going to make Kiddush, and presumably she didn't daven yet, so then she would make the Kedusha Shayom first, and then the Boy Free Agafen, because for her, she's fulfilling a mitzvah in Torah right now. So then if you're fulfilling your mitzvah in Torah versus your mitzvah midrabanan, the Slach works with the Pnei Yoshua, that if you have one component, if you have 2 components of the same mitzvah, the Raisa takes precedence over the Rabbanan, even if the Rabbanan has Tadir. All things being equal, we go with Tadir, but the Raisa beats the Rabbanan even if it's not Tadir. So the Slach even took it to the next step, that even if you didn't daven at all, that's how far you have to go. So that's the Kiddush of the Slach, and the Pri Chadash wants to bring a raya to the Slach and to Bnei Yoshua that he agrees with the principle that if you have one mitzvah with 2 components, the Deraisa and Durabanan, the Deraisa beats out the Durabanan even if the Durabanan is Tadir. What's his raya? Kriya Shema. The Gemara tells us in Bracha as well. Lama Kadma. Why goes to the order? Why do we do parasha? Why the order? Lama Kadma parasha Rishona Lashniya. So first we want to be makabel kabbalas al malchus shamayim, and then we want to accept kabbalas al mitzvahs. That's the order. So comes along the Pri Chadash and raises the question. Though before he raises the question, let me just give you some facts. So number one, it's a machlokas in the Gemara whether Kriya Shema is deraisa derabanan, but it's no doubt even we pass in Kriya Shema is deraisa. How much of Kriya Shema is deraisa? So you have different shittas, the Ramban, Pasuk Rishon, Rashi, the beginning of Brachas, Parsha Rishona. You have the Pri Chadash, 2 parashos, the Rambam, 3 parashos. You have 4 shittas. How much of Kriya Shema is deraisa? The Pri Chadash shittas, the first 2 are. So the Pri Chadash says, how do I know the first 2 parashas are deraisa? Because if Parsha Rishona was deraisa, if Parsha Shia was derabanan, the Gemara never would have asked the Shaila, Lama Kadma Parsha Rishona or Parsha Shnia? If Parsha Rishona is deraisa, because the Pri Chadash is working with the Yisod of the Slach and Pnei Yoshua, if you have different components of one mitzvah, and one aspect is deraisa, one derabanan, the deraisa takes precedence. So the fact that Gemara asked the question means all things being equal. And I know both of them are derabanan. I assume that both deraisa, and therefore now that both deraisa, now let's find another reason why one comes before the other. But if one was deraisa, one's derabanan, the question would never get off. And therefore that's so the Pri Chadash again is working with the same shita as the Pnei Yoshua and the Slach, that a deraisa always takes precedence over a derabanan. When you have to choose when it's one big mitzvah and you have different components, we don't work with Tadir. Tadir takes second fiddle to deraisa versus derabanan. Of course, if it's Tadir and the deraisa, there's nothing to talk about. So that's the sheet of the Pri Chadash, the Slach, and the Bnei Yoshua. Comes along the Shagis Aryeh and says, what are you talking about? There is no such principle. There is no principle that the bare fact that something that, again, if you have one mitzvah and you have different components, there is no rule that the fact that something is deraisa, that automatically takes precedence over the other factors that go into it, but the fact that it's a deraisa versus derabanan isn't automatic, like the Srach claims and the Pnei Yehoshua and the Pri Kiddush. And what's my raya? That this is true? My raya is Kiddush Friday night. What do we do Friday night? Boy Priyadafin's D'Rabbanan. Makadish HaShabbat is D'Oraisa. Again, he's not working with the Magen Avraham and the Rambam. And therefore, he's saying is that we work with Tadir, even if it's a D'Rabbanan versus D'Oraisa. Boy Priyadafin is only a D'Rabbanan. Makadish HaShabbat is D'Oraisa. And yet we make the D'Rabbanan, so we see that this whole principle doesn't exist. And he goes on, the Shagar Saye, he goes into other simanim, he talks about Kriya Shema versus Birkas Hamazon. So Kriya Shema, they're both D'Oraisa, but Kriya Shema is Tadia, but Birkas Hamazon really isn't Tadia. Birkas Hamazon is a Matzoi. I might eat 6 meals a day, and I only say Kriya Shema, but I don't have to. So he gets into, but maybe on Shabbos he says, since on Shabbos you have a chiyuv to Birkas Hamazon, it is a Tadia Shechova, but then he gets into Kriya Shema, but then Paranzel he points out, but let's say during the week, when Birkas Hamazon is D'Oraisa, and he's assuming Sfirat Omer is only D'Rabbanan, he says you can pick Eitz Mehem Shiyirta. There is no rule that you have to pick it. The fact that Birkas Hamazon is D'Oraisa and Sfirat Omer is D'Rabbanan, it doesn't automatically get that status. So that's the Shita of the Shargis Aryeh, that there is no specific order. Not like the first Shita that we go all the way. He's saying is that the fact that one's D'Oraisa, one's D'Rabbanan, that's a major machloket achronim, whether automatically the fact that one's D'Oraisa, one's D'Rabbanan. I mean, this to point out, we see where else we find one, it's a shiloh if it is, but we find one mitzvah with different components, and we do the D'Oraisa before D'Rabbanan. So, again, we'll get into it more when we learn Sfiras HaOmer, but there's a whole machlokas we showed him today, whether Sfiras HaOmer is D'Oraisa D'Rabbanan, and there's a middle shita of Rabbeinu Yerucham. Rabbeinu Yerucham has a shita that Sfiras Hayamim is D'Oraisa, and Sfiras Hashru is counting days is D'Oraisa, even Bizman Hazeh. But counting weeks is only D'Rabbanan. In fact, that's what the Sri Pesach Chaim points out. That's the minig of the Svardim. The Svardim we count days, weeks, and we say La'omer at the end. Svardim count, today is the 22nd day La'omer, which is 3 weeks and 1 day. They break it. So, why do they put La'omer in between days and weeks, or Sri Pesach Chaim? Because that's closest with Shitas Rabbeinu Yerucham, that days are D'Oraisa, weeks are D'Rabbanan. They want to break up to a demarcation between the D'Oraisa and D'Rabbanan. So either we see that you're counting days there, according to Rabbeinu Yerucham, we see you're counting days before weeks, and we see the D'Oraisa comes before the D'Rabbanan, but it wouldn't be a raya anyway against, because number one, days are more tadia, because days you start counting even the first 6 days. So, and anyway, it makes sense you count the days before you count the weeks, so when does it be a raya? But this what we see anyway, during the Sphira, that we're counting days before weeks, and according to Rabbeinu Yerucham, we see that days are D'Oraisa, weeks are D'Rabbanan. So we see this concept of D'Oraisa beating out a D'Rabbanan. So there's an interesting Gemara in a different context that we're going to go into when we get to which is coming up. We have to get into Parashat Zachar and Purim as we're getting to Rosh Chodesh. So I'll come back to that raya when we talk about it in the next couple of weeks. But just to continue on the topic of Tadir for a minute, so we see when it's a D'Oraisa versus D'Rabbanan, so we seem to say that the D'Oraisa takes precedence, over a D'Rabbanan. So So there's another issue of Tanya we find, that the Gemara tells us in Shabbos that you have a choice between Ner Shabbos, Ner Shel Chanukah, and Kiddush al Hayayin. So which one takes precedence? So the Gemara tells us Ner Shabbos wins because of Shalom Bayis, Ner Chanukah wins because of Persumei Nisa, and Kiddush al Hayayin comes in last, or third, because of Tadyar. So the Tosfos raises the following shaila. Aluminik seems to go against the Gemara, because when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos Chanukah, we take out 3 Sifrei Torah. What's the Seder HaKriya? Parashat Shavua, and then we read Rosh Chodesh, and then we read Chanukah. So Tosfos says, what do you mean? It should be Rosh Chodesh is Tadir, Chanukah is Persumei Nisa. We should read Chanukah then Persumei Nisa. How do we reconcile our minig with the Gemara? The Gemara says Persumei Nisa beats out Tadir, because Ner Chanukah beats out Kiddush al Hayayin. And yet we see when it comes to Kriyas HaTorah, we're going with Tadir over Persumei Nisa. That's Tosfos Shaila. So some Rishonim answer, when do we say Tadir wins? That's only when we're talking about a sequence. When we have a sequence, then Tadir kicks in. But if you're choosing either or, I only could do one now. I only could do Ner Chanukah. I only could do wine for Kiddush. So if it's either or, Tadir doesn't even come into the picture. Tadir only kicks in. It's only a din in sequence. Here, the Gemara was the case of either or. And the other Rishonim disagree and say no. Tadir, of course, works sequence, but Tadir also works when you have to make a choice either or. If you have to make a choice either or, so how do you reconcile a minig with the Gemara? So they come on to another answer. They say the reason is because really Persumei Nisa, it says Persumei Nisa Adif. It doesn't say Persumei Nisa Kodem. We know sometimes Achron Chavim, being first isn't always best. So what is they explain? That really Chanukah should come before Rosh Chodesh because Persumei Nisa is Adif. But the halacha is we read the Haftorah from the last thing we read. So Dafka, because Persumei Nisa is more chashiv, we put it at the end because we want to read the Haftorah of Chanukah, not Rosh Chodesh. So therefore, Persumei Nisa is Adif, whether it's either or sequence. But the only reason our order is, it's still Adif, it's just not first, and therefore, so that's a Machlokas Rishonim, and whether Tadir is limited to sequence, or Persumei Nisa, or Tadir even plays a role when we're choosing either or. That it's just not limited to sequence. In fact, where else do we find this? The Gemara in Brachas, when the Gemara talks about, let's say, really you can daven Musaf all day, and you can daven Mincha all day. We daven Musaf in the morning, so it's usually not an issue. But let's say a person, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it was Rosh Chodesh or whatever, and they didn't daven Musaf yet, it's the Zman Mincha. So what do you daven first, Musaf or Mincha? So, strictly speaking, the halacha is you daven Mincha before Musaf, because the Gemara says Tadir v'sheino Tadir kodem. The Rabbi just explains if you're davening with Tzibor, so then you daven Musaf first and then Mincha, not to confuse the Olam with the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. And therefore, what's the person going to say? You know what? Last week I davened Musaf at 8 o'clock in the morning, and this week I daven at 3 o'clock. I daven Mincha before Musaf, so obviously I could daven Mincha at 9 o'clock in the morning, because whatever, I'm just making it up, whatever the person might. So we always want to keep it simple with tzibor. So the rule is mincha should be, but because not to confuse the tzibor, that takes precedence. But outside there, so if you're davening at home, you should daven mincha first. So that's the halacha. So comes along, the Achronim have the following shaila. Let's say, I'm not going to say how much time, whether it depends how long it takes you to daven a Shemona Esrei. So you can fill in whether it's 30 seconds, my shaila, or 10 minutes. Let's say it's right before Shkia, you only have time to daven Musaf or Mincha. You can fill in the time slot. So what should I daven? Should I daven Musaf or Mincha? So some say, well, it's Mincha, Tadir Sheino Tadir Tadir Kodem, and therefore Mincha takes precedence, I should daven Mincha. Another Rachman saying, no. When do we say, it's the same Machokas, when do we say Tadir wins? That's only if it's a sequence. I'm davening both Mincha and Musaf now, so then Mincha precedes Musaf. But here I have to make a choice. So we need some other principle to make the decision. Tadir doesn't affect my decision here. So why should one take... So maybe Mincha will win, but it won't be because of Tadir. So the Achronim point out Musaf would win. But because why? For another reason. Because the halacha is, as the Mishnah tells us in the beginning of the fourth parak in Brachas, there's a din of tashlumin, there's a din of makeup. You can make, the halacha is that if you miss shachar, you should make it a mincha, ma'ariv, shachar. We paskin halacha, you only can make up the next tefillah. In other words, if you miss shachar, you can make it up a mincha. But if you miss shachar, you can't daven two Shemona Esreis a ma'ariv. It's too late. The statute of limitations have ran out on you. So the halacha is this tashlumin, and Tosas asks, Musaf is conspicuously left out. The Gemara says, Tosas says, because Musaf is exclusively linked to karbanos, but shachar is mincha ma'ariv is rachamim. So rachamim is always appropriate. So either way, the point being is, it's clear from the Rishonim, there is no tashlum when it comes to Musaf. So comes along some of the Achronim. You know, the Yehuda discusses and others that since if I don't daven Mincha, I can make it up at Ma'ariv. But if I don't daven Musaf, there is no makeup. So in the case where I only can daven one now, I should daven Musaf, because daven Musaf, and then I could daven Mincha with Tashlum and Ma'ariv. But if I would daven Mincha over Yom Bata Karbon, it would be too late. I can't daven Musaf anymore. So therefore, so some folks can say, no, you should daven. So again, so the point being is, this Nakuda, whether Tadir is limited to sequence, or Tadir plays a role even when it's not sequence. So to summarize, we had the issue between the Pnei Yoshua Slach versus the Shagash Aryeh. One question is, whether if you have the Deraisa versus the Rabbanan, so Tadir doesn't play a role either. According to the Slach and Pnei Yoshua, the Pri Chodesh, the Deraisa beats out the Rabbanan, even if the Rabbanan is Tadir. The Shagas Aryeh disagrees. The Raisa Drabanan play no role in making that decision of sequence. Tadir would play that role. Tadir, or the Drabanan, would beat out an Eino Tadir Deraisa. And then we pointed out in the Gemara in Shabbos, a further issue, how far does Tadir go? Is Tadir only a question of, when I'm doing both, which one comes first? Or does Tadir play a role even in either or? Like it's Mashma in the Gemara, they brought up the Tadir in an either or question, so it could be, one could argue in the Gemara that Tadir even plays a role either or. And thirdly, we discussed the issue of Tadir as well, the same issue, but in a different context between Mincha and Musaf, whether does it only apply in sequence, so therefore, when I'm about to daven Musaf Mincha now, do I say then Mincha wins, but if I'm only going to daven one, then not necessarily, or no, Tadir plays a role, that's a look, I got to daven Mincha, too bad, you can't daven Musaf, and that's the end of it. So those are just some of the issues that come up on the topic of Tadir, but it ties into our Kiddush issue in terms of our Seder HaKiddush, how come we make the Boy Pri Agafen before is it because, like, the Pnei Yeshua, the Schachor, we're only dealing with Drabanans, and therefore, if they're both only Drabanan, the time we make Kiddush our Yayin, so hence, Boy Pri Agafen wins, but in Achinami, perhaps if this was our first time going to the midst of Kiddush, then maybe we would go Mekadosh Shabbos first. And the Shagar says, no, there is no rule, doesn't exist, that the rights, the component automatically beats out of Draban. Haraya is Kiddush. You always go with Tadir, even a Tadir Duraban beats out a Eno Tadir Daraisa. That's what Machlok is. And then the other issue in Tadir, whether Tadir only plays the role in sequence, or does Tadir even play a stronger role? You even determine, if I only have one mitzvah to do, does Tadir play a role in determining whether Mustaf or Mincha, or in this case, whether it's the Seder Rosh Chodesh or Chanukah definitely plays a role in, but in an either or question.